Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome to Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. This is our unscripted edition. So, of course, I have my special guest today, Dr. Jeremy Sherman, and I am your host, Jennifer Furlong. We're going to have a great time today because we're going to talk about language and critical thinking and the connections between words and our thoughts and all of that cool stuff. I have a feeling we're going to touch on all kinds of different really cool topics. So I'm really super excited to have you here today, Jeremy. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show and just to share some of your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. Wisdom, by the way, I'll mention this just jumping out the box.
Yes.
Where does wisdom get studied? It gets studied in philosophy. There's an interesting word. It means love of wisdom. Well, any idiot can claim that they love wisdom, and most do. So I actually think the pursuit of a clearer understanding of what wisdom is would actually be called sophology. It'd be the study of wisdom. What is wisdom?
Right.
So,
Right.
So I don't know if what I have to offer is wisdom, but I certainly pursue it.
Right, right. Or what was it? True wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Isn't that what
Yeah,
Socrates said?
something
Knowing that
like
we know
that.
nothing.
And I think it's and actually, I mean, we're jumping right into it.
Right?
I don't think that quite works. Um,
Ah.
No, actually, I fit in a camp that's a camp that I've described that's in between what I'll call fundamentalist hypocrisy, which is claiming you know the rules, you're not going to live by them. Nobody does because there are no formulas as absolute as that. So that's on the one hand is fundamentalist hypocrisy. It can be for anything. It could be hippie fundamentalism, whatever.
Right.
And the other one is what I'd call cynical or fatalistic hypocrisy, which is no one knows anything. I call it the
Mm.
doctrine of foregone inconclusion. It's basically a way of saying I can do and believe whatever I want because no one knows anything. So I sit
Mhm.
in between there in what I call ironic fallibilism. And fallibilism is kind of fundamental to my entire approach. I know we're jumping right in, but
No, I love it. I love it.
okay.
Let's jump in. Let's
So
dive in.
fallibilism is a concept that was born in the philosophy called pragmatism. But my motto as a devout fallibilist is no matter how confident I am in a bet, I remain still more confident that it is a bet.
Mm.
So
Yes. Yes.
the idea that nobody knows anything, I don't buy. The idea that
Right.
that I know for sure, for absolute sure, I don't buy.
Yeah.
We're all guessing. Life has always been guesswork, and it's guesswork with all sorts of ironic situations where you guess right and it turns out wrong, or you guess wrong and it turns out right. That's the irony part of it. So
Right, right. So we have, rules that we live by, right? We have set rules, whether they're written rules or norms, by which we should probably behave, right? The expectations, the things that we should say or should not say in certain situations, things that we should do, behaviors that we should or should not do. But I really love your idea or your belief system and that, hey, look, life really is one big experiment, isn't it? It's just one big experiment. And some things that'll work in one situation may not necessarily work in another situation, depending on, a whole host of issues that
yeah,
are going on.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm with that. I find a useful metaphor for this, for just for living, but also I should make clear I've spent 25 years doing origins of life research from chemistry,
Mhm.
um, and as a result, coming up with a sense of what life is. And as you say, it has been one long experiment.
Mhm.
Yoda is motivational, but he's flat out wrong when he says there is no try. There's only do. There's only try.
Mhm.
That's all we've
Mhm.
ever had. And language makes it both more precise and more vague, more visionary and more delusional. But the metaphor I find useful for thinking about this kind of iffiness of life is a winding road that we're driving And there is no GPS for it. We're kind of building the road as we're traveling, and then we're doing it with a bunch of other cars. And we have to watch out for errors on both sides of the road. That is, it's a ridge road. You can fall off on either side. So fundamentalisms that say always do this are a little bit like saying always turn right on the winding road or always turn left. And that's just not going to work. Nobody lives by it. That would be the fundamentalist hypocrisy I was describing before. And the alternative, the cynical or fatalistic hypocrisy would be saying, yeah, we don't know where the road's going, so you can close your eyes and do whatever you want.
Right. It's not going to matter anyway.
Yeah, I think it's really serious business. It's really dire. You can really die from making the wrong choice, and it's also slapstick. That's the odd thing about it. That's the irony of life's iffiness. Is that we really would like to know what to do. We can make our educated guesses, and they still could come out wrong.
Yes. Yeah, that's it right there. We make the best educated guess that we have with the information that we have, right? And I think that's where, with today's topic, what I wanted to have you on the show for is, to really focus on language and how language really affects how we think, how we see things, how we view things, our responses to things. So I did a little digging, and it says your PhD is in evolutionary epistemology. So explain to everyone what those $20 words mean. Like, what is that in layman terms?
Yeah, no, the $20 words. No, all they're just designed to impress people. That's all. Right. I have no idea what they mean. No, actually, it's much clearer than that. It's a really basic, fundamental, obvious topic. Organisms from the origins of life have shopped for interpretations. That is, I don't mean that they have, as individuals, a bacterium is shopping, but evolution is a trial and error process where better interpretations, better responsiveness to circumstances will tend to accumulate. So evolutionary epistemology is the study of how you could say, the natural history of shopping among interpretations. Noticing that there are radical differences. The main one I would put, I would say that there are three basic kinds of interpretive processes in organisms. There's the basic, you could call the silent self that we have in common with bacteria. That is, all organisms are hustling to stay alive. They struggle for their existence. Then there's feelings, which is a whole other realm in which we do that. And then there's language for humans. And so language and technology, the radical difference from my perspective between humans and other organisms. So how language changes how we shop among interpretations is, in a way, your topic and mine. We're both really interested in that question. And it's not like with language we transcended the other two realms. Yesterday was a sleepy day for me, but I still managed to produce 240 billion new replacement cells. Everybody does every day. That's impressive work.
It sounds impressive, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it was a slouchy day. Like I said, I didn't get much done. But other than that, that was on my to-do list, and I was able to tick it off by the end of the day. So we still got that going on. We still got the feelings going on. And one of the things that fascinates me, especially about language, is how much it's driven by feelings. How much of what we say doesn't have to be actually thought out or reasoned through. It's more like an animal sound. You find yourself in a tight spot, and you remember something you heard, some cliche or something you heard on TV, and you blurt it or you bray it. And if it works, it becomes a habit of speech. You don't have to think about what it means. You just say it because it works. So a lot of our language is what you could describe it as emotionally functional without actually being about the words we're saying.
Right, right. Now, in communication, when I do a lot of workshops with communication skills training, and one of the things that I think is really useful to go back and talk about in the process of communication is how no two people will ever really come from the same frame of reference, right?
Yeah,
Because all of our backgrounds,
yeah,
everything that we have experienced up to this point, including mentors and teachers and
sure.
the movies that we've watched and the music we listen to, and,
And
all
our
of those
and our and
experiences.
our birth temperaments are also different. I mean, yes, we
Right,
yeah,
right, yeah. So that is going to shade the lens through which we see the world, right? But it's
right,
also everything that filter that we're using to interpret everything, that's all that data that's coming at us, right? We can't help but to have that lens interpret that data in a slightly different way, for all of us. So since that's happening in the communication cycle, and no two people can ever come from the same frame of reference, what can we do as communicators to try to handle that in an effective way? If I want to be an effective communicator, and I know language, it's a living, breathing, live thing,
yeah.
right? What are some things that I can do to ensure that I can at least try to become a better communicator? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, okay, remember I was talking about the winding road. And
Yes,
I
yes.
and so notice this about communication and, the pursuit of cultivating rapport with someone.
Mhm.
Rapport is a kind of intimacy, a kind of trusting of each other.
Yes.
Um, and there are two ways to do this, and they're opposites. They're on opposite
Mm,
sides of the road. So let's take a very visceral example. If you want to be in an intimate romantic relationship with each other, that's a high level of trust and rapport. And it has been compared to porcupine sex
mm,
because
mm,
both parties, once you invest in a relationship, you kind of depend upon it, and so you are looking for two ways to feel safe. One is you want total honesty from the other person. You
mhm.
don't, and the other is that you want total kindness, affirmation, generosity of spirit. You want to be affirmed. If you're in there really close with someone, you don't want them saying something sharp at you, threatening.
Right.
Okay. So one poet describes this as fine. He says, uh, at this incomplete distance from oh, no, sorry. He says, it becomes still more difficult to find words at once true and kind. Okay.
Mm,
So
mhm.
he says, words at once true and kind, or not untrue and not unkind. He's talking about the difficulties in relationship. So notice how this relates to something broader than that. We extol two virtues, realism and hope.
Mm,
Okay.
mhm.
They are sometimes compatible when you are during the honeymoon period of any relationship, whether it be business or otherwise. You have a sense that you will have nothing but honest kindness for each other.
Right, right.
But that's very difficult to sustain. So back to your question, how do you create rapport through language? We use both sides of it. We use our capacity for precision and
Mm,
honesty, and we use our capacity for humoring, for letting stuff slide. And
mm,
those are two different, they're opposite behaviors often enough that you should think of them as the two sides of the road. So there are times when you are too honest or too dishonest for building the rapport. There are times when you are listening too closely or not listening well enough, and you're trying to figure out how to do. I have actually gotten a situation because I've gotten so fussy about language where I feel like saying, I'm sorry I was listening too closely to you. I can be more
yes.
inattentive if you,
Mhm.
from now on, I pledge to be more inattentive. Because, like I say, a lot of what people are saying is more like animal sounds. They're not actually thinking it through. It's not to be parsed and analyzed. They want to,
Right.
yeah, it's
Yes.
just a cooing sound. It's a territorial sound, whatever. It's what they're saying, what they need to feel okay about themselves. It's not like they've actually thought about it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
background music for them. So this is an interesting challenge. Language makes it possibly way more precise and way more imprecise, and we're trying
Right.
to figure out when to do which.
Yeah, and it's no easy task, and I'm glad you brought up, the longevity of different relationships that you have. At the very beginning, we do have that honeymoon period. Now, next month, my husband and I are going to be celebrating 25 years of putting
Yes,
up with each other,
yes,
right? So, and I can tell you, yeah, that winding road, you have a lot of decisions to make, and I agree with you 100%. You have to be able to find the time when, okay, honesty is the best policy at this moment, but how do I temper that with maybe a little delicacy, right? I need to be delicate
yeah.
in this moment. And sometimes, though, being delicate is not the thing that's going to work.
No, no.
Sometimes
In
you
fact, it's
just
that
have
way.
to be, yeah.
Well, I would say I love the Southern talent for honesty that is blunt but friendly. I study
You're
the
right.
cultures that are capable of that, and yours is more capable of that than Northern California, I would say, these days.
Mm,
We're busy trying to have a win-win where we can be perfectly honest and perfectly kind all the time. I don't think that works. But notice this about honesty, or you could say bluntness and tact. Okay,
mm.
bluntness respects the other person, um, ability to hear you,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
but disrespects them enough to say something blunt to them. Tact respects their self-esteem. It's like a kind of humoring, but disrespects their ability to hear you. That is,
Mhm,
it's a
mhm.
kind of coddling. So the tensions
Yes.
between them, and there is an assumption. This is like you'll often get this where people will say, "No, it's always a win-win." Um, you can always say your honesty tactfully. I don't buy it. Now, I do
Right.
buy it in a way. For I would say for 30 years, I have made a game for myself out of the assumption that there's nothing I can't say if I find the right words for it. I don't
Mhm.
believe it's true. And I
Right,
certainly would
right.
not hold other people to that standard, or else it's kill the messenger territory. But for myself, I do make a game of finding the most effective way to say what I really think. And I've actually described this as Gent 3.0. The original gents were landed gentry. Then gents became people who were extremely tactful and diplomatic. But Gent 3.0, if you don't count the gent on the bathroom door, you know what I'm talking about, is is the person who finds who is masterful at saying words both true and kind, or you could say
Right.
maximizing the honesty, the kindness of their honesty. That's a
Right.
skill that I think you're in the business of promoting, and I am too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question that came in from Larry Taylor. He's watching on Facebook, and he says, "Does the cooing foster the second individual's belief in bad decisions that they have made?"
I think I get the question. So if you're talking
Mhm,
about um, I think if you're talking about the cooing in the honeymoon period, where you're whispering
mhm.
sweet nothings at each other, but they're not nothings. You're actually saying, "My honest, true, genuine, authentic belief is that I will love you forever, forever, forever. You can do no wrong." All of that. Yes,
Right,
in a way, it is a kind of lulling. That is, they can end up feeling like they were shanghaied. I don't know if you know the
right.
word, but that basically uh, they were led astray. And
Mhm.
so that if a relationship breaks up, um, and this has applications in business, but let's just stay with the romantic because it's so visceral and we recognize it so well. The person can feel betrayed on either front or both. You were not kind enough to me. You were not honest enough to me, as if you can have a win-win with them always. You can't. You
Right,
can't.
no,
No, you
it's not
can't.
gonna
No,
happen.
there will be times when you have to say something um, uh, that doesn't feel kind.
Right. You have to say something that's a little bit uncomfortable for
That's
them.
right, and even if you say it with the highest degree of kindness, it won't necessarily be received that way because of the thing,
Right.
our
Yeah.
stakes are different in things.
Right.
Anyway, that
Yeah.
I don't know if that relates to the question, but yes, and the second individual can come away feeling like they made a bad decision. There are hundreds of pop songs that are basically someone saying, "I made a bad decision. My only mistake in this relationship that is now broken up is to think that I had anything with you." Um,
Right.
yeah, they're often heroic martyr songs.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift and
Yeah.
Adele have made a living off of that. Nashville is basically funded by that entire pop song industry. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
I like this is a nice transition to something I've been wanting to ask because in public speaking, or not in public speaking, but in communication, well, I guess in public speaking as well. But in communication, we have a lot of debates regarding whose responsibility is it to make
yeah,
sure that the message you're sending is in fact the message that is being received, right? So I say that the message you send may not necessarily be the message that is received. So there's two sides to this, right? As the person who's speaking, who's giving you the information, of course I have to be aware and in tune. And you said there's a lot of trust that goes into this as well. And I agree with that. So I think there's that side of the equation, right? We have a responsibility to that. What about the responsibility of the listener to how they are approaching their listening and how they are interpreting what it is that is being said, interpreting that message. So do you think that one has more responsibility than the other in these communication instances, or does it kind of change over time, depends on context? What do you think about that?
well, so it's worth recognizing that we don't get to adjudicate this. We don't get to set a
Mhm.
policy about this. We're dealing with real people, and they will make different kinds of effort. Uh,
Yes.
I'm very interested in listenomics, which is the allocation of our finite attention for listening.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
that is, I have to pay attention to where I listen. You could also call it attentionomics. It's a hot topic, but it's my own choice what I listen to and what I don't. I have
Mhm.
come to find very useful the term "I fuss elsewhere." Sorry,
Mhm.
I fuss elsewhere. We all have our limited fuss budgets. I can only fuss about so much stuff, so I have to allocate that carefully. Um, uh, I think I think trust has to be earned. Um,
Mhm.
uh, but I also don't think that that means that uh, the people from whom it has to be earned are right about who to trust. That is,
Right.
you may have to earn trust from someone who really shouldn't be in the business of deciding who's trustworthy. That
Yeah.
sometimes happens. You can be on a
Right.
job where you have to earn the trust of a boss who you don't actually think that much of.
Mhm.
Uh, I think of the burden of communication being on the communicator, not the listener. Um, I can do what I can to try to encourage greater listening, but that's mostly got to do with my communication. That is, I'm
Right.
very interested in how to stir someone's attention.
Mhm.
Um, it's
Right.
a big part of what it goes into being a writer is figuring out how to stir and keep people's attention. But it has
Yes.
to be I have to earn it even from blithering idiots. That is, if
Right.
I want their attention, I've got to earn it. It's on me. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I this, I love that you just said that because Larry just he posted another comment, a follow-up. He said, "Thank you. I embrace the blunt side, but it's maddening in a professional environment to have tact forced upon you when the mass, and in parentheses, entire office, can pinpoint the error or the issue." Right.
Oh, amen, Larry. No, and I think that's often the case.
Mhm.
That you're dealing with an unfortunately common problem is that everybody in the office knows there's a problem, and yet you can't really afford to talk about it.
Mhm.
And think about the parallel to what's going on in Russia right now. No one can talk about it.
Mhm.
Everybody knows it. Um, uh, Realism is a casualty. when you have a
Right.
system that saturates as much as that with you could say the elephant is not just in the room, the elephant is the room. That
Right.
is, you can't
Right.
talk about the entire context you're stuck in. uh,
Mhm.
a real big problem.
Yeah, yeah. Now I had read, when I did my deep dive and I was stalking you online for a little bit. So, you had done, I guess, some work with the Army, right? And some
Yeah,
critical thinking skills.
very
So,
short stint.
yeah, short stint, but, I think some of the things that we're talking about, you brought up some of the challenges like with Russia, and
Yeah,
we need to embrace tact, but at the same time, when it's thrust upon you and you have to say the things that need to be said,
yeah,
and in the military, Larry served in the military, he was in
yeah,
the Army, I was in the Marine Corps, and sometimes, you are in a position where it takes a lot of courage to be that voice, right?
yeah.
To kind of go against that status quo, right?
Oh,
To
of
challenge
course.
things around
No,
you.
that's right. We're still on the. This is all the same topic. What I
Mhm.
talked about when I presented to the Army School of the Army Intelligence School on critical thinking. They were working out the design of a new critical thinking program, and I made the same point we're making here, which is I actually started with the common joke about military intelligence being an oxymoron. I
Mhm.
find oxymorons incredibly useful for cultivating wisdom. Um,
Mhm.
I was saying to them that you have to recognize that a lot of what you are cultivating in the military is alignment. Yours is not to
Mhm.
wonder why, yours is just to do or die. So you're going to have to really think about where you want the critical thinking to be injected into the program. It's not like if you have 8 hours of training in critical thinking, that's going to somehow swamp at the countless hours being trained to follow orders, nor
Right.
do you necessarily want it to counter the effects of all those other hours.
Right.
You have to figure out where you want it used, where you want the critical thinking used. So
Right.
that was the interesting challenge there, which is very much like what we're talking about here. So whether you call it tact or whether call it uniformity for alignment,
Mhm.
those are crucial. We
Right.
really need them. We need
Mhm.
that kind of alignment. We don't have it right now in the United States. It puts us at a security risk to not have that kind of alignment in the United States. And at the same time, any side, any faction is likely to say, uh, uh, yes, we shouldn't be fighting. We don't need to fight. Let's all come together and agree on what I think.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Stop with
That's
all of this.
really what we mean by I just want some peace, right? I want some
I want
peace and
peace. Yes, I
quiet.
want peace,
I
which
just
means I
want
want
peace.
my
I want
way.
everyone to,
That's
yeah, yeah,
right. That's
agree
right.
with me,
That's
and
right.
then we will have
Yes,
peace.
because it's obvious to every clear-thinking human being that I'm right. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Or should be.
I don't understand why everybody can't see that, right? So,
Exactly.
I wanna get into, the concepts of a-holery and jerkology. This is really why I wanted you, on the show. I wanted to talk
Yeah,
about
I,
a-holery and jerkology.
I did not know. I noticed that you didn't slip that into the introduction. You wanted me to be able to establish some trust before I start talking about a-holes.
That's right.
Um,
That's
no,
right.
so
Yeah, we can't jump right into that
no,
topic,
that's right. It could offend all sorts of people, especially this guy from Berkeley talking about a-holes. You know
right?
where that's going. You know. No,
That
actually,
guy on
yeah,
the left coast, right?
that's right. Left coast. He's now gonna tell us that he's an expert on who's the a-hole. No, let me make very clear what's going on here. So, uh, I call myself a psychoproctologist. That is, I am pursuing more objective uh, methods for diagnosing, treating, and preventing a-holery.
Mhm.
And I also find it fascinating that there is probably no more popular word in folk psychology than a-hole and all its
Mhm.
variations. Everybody knows what it means. And yet
Right.
it's almost a taboo topic in psychology. I know from direct experience that there are real limits on how much you can bring up that topic. I think of a-hole as a different category than the ones that get clinical diagnosis. And I've noticed that we don't have a very clear definition on it. The question that first spawned my research 25 years ago, you could say is well, it would be a Zen koan. You could say it's what is a butthead, since it can't just be whoever I happen to butt heads with. That is what
Right.
distinguishes a butthead. And so I have come to an approach to it that is born of, see, I do this thing with words that is actually rare in academics. I assume that if I really want to understand a quality, I don't get to just do metaphoric, impressionistic analysis of it, come up with some rigorous name and then use it. I have to be able to explain how it emerges from what preceded it. So, for example, 25 years on the origins of life, chemistry doesn't try to do anything. Living things try to stay alive. What is trying? If I want to understand what trying is, what organisms and trying, what beings and trying are, I have to explain them from chemistry with no smoke and mirrors. The same was true for me and the concept of the a-hole. If I want to understand what they are, I have to explain them from their origins. And while there are lots of animal predators and parasites and all that, a-hole is a human thing.
Right.
And I think it's a product of language.
Yes.
So that is, it's an option available to us because of language, and it's also an option we would want if we had language. That is for reasons I'll explain. But I should make this clear from the beginning. It's a breeze to be nonpartisan about a-hole. A-hole has nothing to do with what you claim to believe. It has nothing to do with what you claim to believe so strongly and firmly and passionately that it trumps all other considerations. You can be an a-hole for anything or for nothing. That's all window dressing. So it's very easy to be nonpartisan in this line of work. It's not got to do with your claim beliefs. In fact, it's a commonality that crosses through opposite belief systems. You've got cults and counter cults. They're exactly the same. They're just different brandings. Same deal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to jump in and say, a part-time gig that I have is as a media analyst, and I work for this media organization. We're kind of like a watchdog organization. So we read the news and we rate it for reliability and bias. And we had, we always work in a pod of 3 analysts, and you always have a right lean, a left lean, and then someone who says they're in the center, but depending on the topic,
independence has become a new smokescreen.
Exactly, right. So, but just the other day, I was working a shift, and we had a fantastic conversation, just like this, where we're reading the news, and you have to dig into the language that's being used, and you can see it on both sides of the spectrum, I guess, especially the fringe, like you get way over to the right, way over to the left. We're even seeing some commonalities that, how the language is being used.
No, that's right. So so you could say one of the steps. So I want to come back to how I think about the natural evolution of a-holery. But look at this trick. Suppose you go to an event and you have an epiphany. You have a wake up. Let me give you a more practical example. Suppose that you went to a Marvel comic movie and you really identified with Iron Man, let's say. Okay, you felt like Iron Man was your kind of person, and you left the theater. And then Thanos is the enemy, let's say, okay?
Right.
Okay, so you left the theater feeling like you had totally embraced Iron Man against Thanos. That they were kind of your ally, and all you know about Iron Man is he's hella good, and all you know about Thanos is he's hella bad, and so you now feel like you're an ally of Iron Man. And if anybody attacks you, they're actually attacking Iron Man. And that means that they're Thanos. You can end up with 2 words, just a black hat word and a white hat word. You don't ever have to think about what those words mean. You could use patriot and traitor.
Yes.
Whatever you can say, a Christian and
Mhm.
Antichrist, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can say, it could be on the left, right, whatever. But
Right.
once you've
Mhm.
got, you don't actually have to think about defining those words at all. You
Mhm.
just swing them as though you're always on the side of right, and anybody who's opposed to you is on the side of left. You never have to think about what it means to be Christian in order to use the word that way, or woke, which can be used in either direction. That is, if you wanted to talk about the leftists who might do this, they would say, I embrace wokeness. Or I could say, I embrace kindness, love. Mindfulness is one of my pet peeves on the left.
Mhm.
There was a time when I was dating in Berkeley and simply gave up,
Mm.
because everybody was using the word mindful. They could not define it, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
they knew it was hella good. And if I disagreed with them about something, I wasn't being mindful. It's as simple, it's as simple as that. And you can do it with any words. That's what I mean. So no wonder, yes, if you find people doing that on either side, um, that's part of what goes on in being
Yeah, and
in
I would argue that if you're debating something, if you're bringing something opposite to what I'm talking about, you are being mindful of that because you're thinking about it and you are considering it. And so let's talk about this. I would
yes, and
argue.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Right.
Um, uh,
But back again, let's have peace. Agree with me and we'll have peace. Right.
oh, this is one of those humoring moments. No, I want to say rhetoric is inescapable.
Right.
We
Right.
will use it. The idea that, haha, you use rhetoric, therefore you're slippery and I'm not. I mean, one of the
Right.
standard moves being made these days is, if I can find one mistake in what you do, it proves that I don't make any mistakes. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
this is one of the most popular moves at all in the
Mhm.
repertoire of the generic a-hole. But let me get
Right.
back to one thing about, um, I want to connect a-holes to the 240 billion cells a day
Right.
thing. And make it's a long walk, but I can make it short. Um, Organisms are up against what the second law of thermodynamics. Everything's falling apart.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Organisms have to regenerate themselves faster than they fall apart. That's the basic struggle for existence thing. We have to we have to protect ourselves against degeneration, and we have to repair whatever degenerates. We're doing that all the time.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that sets up an interesting relationship with energy. We need energy in order to repair ourselves, but energy is exactly what degenerates us. Think
Mhm.
about it. A windstorm is not going to organize a pile of papers. It's going to scatter a pile of
Mhm.
papers.
Right.
So this means that all organisms are engaged in selective interaction. We
Mhm.
take in the energy we can use to regenerate ourselves, and we keep out the energy that will degenerate ourselves. Now, what
Right.
happens when you drop that, when you evolve that into the realm of emotions and words?
Mm.
You get
Mhm.
confirmation bias. You
Yes.
take in the ideas, the concepts that you can use to regenerate yourself, and you keep out the ideas that will degenerate your mojo, your motivation, whatever. That's
Mhm.
fundamental. That's what, and so, and we all need it. And this is another feature of language. Language makes us an un, unprecedentedly anxious species. If you
Yes.
compare what a dog could worry about, the variety of things a dog could worry about, to what a human could worry about, just no contest. No contest.
Right.
We are way in over our heads, the things that could keep us up at night. And language just affords us this confirmation bias, the ability to avoid thinking about treacherous things, sidestepping it, changing the subject, humoring ourselves in effect. Um,
Mhm.
so for me, I think the difference between decent, normal, okay people uh, and a-holes is that normal, decent people recognize a confirmation bias is a problem they have to manage.
Right. Right.
And a-holes treat confirmation bias as the solution to all their problems.
Right.
Simple as
Right.
that. It is once it becomes absolute. You could say confirmation bias tends to corrupt. Absolute confirmation bias corrupts absolutely. It
Mhm.
is once you've gotten to the point where you are self-winding, no matter what you hear from the outside wild world, it only affirms you. If they disagree with me, that proves I'm right. If they agree with me, it proves I'm right. You're just self-winding at the point. No, at that point, you're an a-hole. There's no talking to you.
Right.
You're no longer in the business of learning, adjusting, adapting. You're just in the business of maintaining your fake infallibility. It's the
Yeah.
opposite of
How
fallible. Yeah.
how do you tell if someone is just straight up an a-hole, right? Like this is just who this person is, right?
Yeah.
Versus someone is having an a-hole moment.
Yes, a great question, because that's my point. Remember, the original quote wasn't power corrupts, it's power tends to corrupt. I would say that
Mhm.
about all the rhetorical slippery moves we all use, and we all
Right.
use them. We
Yeah.
are all engaged in some hypocrisy. We all lie sometimes. Um, we all gaslight sometimes. I mean,
Mhm.
even if I raise my eyebrow when someone else has a different interpretation of the situation that would inconvenience me a little bit, that's like micro gaslighting. So the idea
Right.
that
Right.
so but then becomes this question: if we all lie, as we do, what distinguishes a liar?
Mhm.
So remember, I'm a fallibilist, so I would never claim. See, people sometimes introduce me as an expert on a-holes. No, you can't be an expert on this. You can be a specialist. I don't think you can be an expert on communications or psychology. They're way too
Mhm.
complicated to call
Yeah.
yourself an expert. I'm a specialist in it. So I'm interested in the guesswork of how to most carefully diagnose someone as an a-hole. Um,
Mhm.
not just having an a-hole moment, as you suggest, but actually an outright a-hole. Um, if they are emphatic, passionately assertive about things that are always to their convenient benefit,
Mhm.
um, uh, and if they play fast and loose with their own opinions, that if their opinions keep on shifting around, I think that
Mhm.
it maybe one of the ways to think about it is that my diagnostic term, what I think you're getting, the extraordinary benefits one gets from becoming an a-hole, is
Mhm.
a wild card trump card.
Mm. Mm.
I'm not talking about Donald Trump here, though I would say
Mhm.
that he actually fits a diagnosis to a T. But I am talking
I
about,
would agree.
okay, a
Yeah.
wild card means you can do or say or claim anything. You can follow
Mhm.
your impulses anywhere, and whatever you say or do is always um, unassailable. That is,
Mhm.
you trump everything else with everything your impulses desire. And boy, do I understand why we would want that. I mean,
Mhm.
who wouldn't want the wild card trump card formula? I mean, it's just
Mhm.
delicious. There are so many ways to fall into this. So the idea that you had to have a bad childhood or it's something about your political beliefs, no, it's nothing like that. It's just an extremely tempting option for a human. It's so much easier to play God than be a human if you can get
Right.
away with it. So a lot of my work is also on how to keep people from getting away with it.
Yeah.
But boy, do I understand why it's tempting. We say crime doesn't pay. No, crime pays really well if you can get away with it. The same with being an a-hole.
Yeah. And it's very challenging, I think, when a part of what happens as we're growing up and, we're listening to the words that are being used to train us, right, in our
Yeah,
thoughts and what we think about ourselves and what we think about others. It can be very difficult to come to the understanding that I'm an imperfect being and I will get things wrong. And
yeah,
that's just a part of life. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say things that are messed up. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world, right? But it's one of those moments that I need to be able to
yeah,
recognize it and learn from it. But in some ways, I think we've done a disservice to a lot of people
yeah,
in that, hey, focus only on your strengths all the time. And,
yeah,
you are unique, you are special, and everything that you do serves a purpose and, that kind of thinking. And I don't know, maybe I'm out in the field somewhere thinking about this in the incorrect way. I don't want to say left field or right field because I know someone will read into that. Oh, what is she saying about that? But I do think that in some ways the language that we're using, especially with our kids, and being in the classroom, college classroom with
yeah,
with some of the kids in the college classroom, they're so afraid to be human, to make mistakes, to
Right.
say that I
Yeah.
was wrong.
Yeah. So there's an interesting challenge. I mean, I could resolve that we should encourage people to I mean, this is central to my work. I believe in the power of standing corrected. That is
Mhm.
standing corrected with your dignity and tact, which means that you identify with yourself as a learner, not as learned. Um,
Mm.
or
Mhm.
and also not these are alternatives to being learnt out, which is the
Mhm.
equivalent of burnt out, which is, so, but at the same time, I recognize that there are these really high stakes situations in which it really matters that you try to get it right. So that's the
Right.
challenge. In general, I resolve to dilemmas, not to, this is the solution. We should allow everybody to make mistakes. But I recognize it's it really is difficult for people who have grown up in any kind of orthodoxy where there is basically that fundamentalist hypocrisy I was talking about before, any kind, and then end up in work lives where they can't afford to make mistakes. It
Right.
results in what I'll call hardening of the smarteries. You
Mhm.
at that point you just can't afford to apologize. Back
Mhm.
to your question about whether you can tell you're dealing with how you could tell you're dealing with someone who's having an a-hole moment or not. I do think that a capacity to stand corrected, if that is
Mhm.
absent from someone, they fit in that category of someone who is faking infallibility, which
Mm.
is my
Mhm.
definition of a-hole. And I also think it's important to recognize that you want to stay clear of such people to the extent you can, because if you're around people who can't apologize, it's
Mhm.
contagious because you
Mhm.
can't afford to apologize to them. If you say, I could have been wrong there, they'll say, yeah, you could have been and you were. That is, they won't
Mhm.
reciprocate. And pretty soon you'll be unable to apologize either. I have broken up with partners because I needed my fallibilism intact. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I could not continue to be in a relationship where I couldn't afford to say I'm sorry. I need a
Right, right.
relationship where I can say I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, mistakes are made and things
Oh no,
happen and
there are thousands of ways to not
right.
apologize while apologizing, while feigning apology.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, now that you've said that, one of the things that I wanted to pick your brain about, that slap heard around the world, right, between Will
Oh,
Smith and, and Chris Rock. Since we're talking about a-holery and all of that, and whether it's a moment and apologies and all of that, what do you take of all? What do you make of all of that with Chris Rock having a joke and it triggered Will to the point he actually storms the stage with physical violence, right? And then the next day, he puts out this apology. What do you make all of that? How would you analyze that situation
it's
through
so
the
funny.
lens of a-holery?
I have avoided dealing with this one. I think there are other issues that are more pressing. Not that I don't deal with. I deal with plenty of trivialities, but I do have an opinion about
Mhm.
it. Brain fart, and also
Yeah.
brain farts are easier when you are in a position of. I'm not condoning it. I'm thinking it was an
Right.
egregious, stupid mistake. I mean, for
Right.
example, there was nothing in that joke that actually referenced alopecia. That is
Right. Right.
no,
Yeah.
it was snatching defeat from the hands of victory for him to get up and get offended about that. It actually called attention to the alopecia. But I do
Mhm.
know this: that is, when you are that thing that Denzel Washington said. I don't believe in angels and
Mhm.
devils, but it's a fine metaphor.
Mhm.
It's okay. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, when you are feeling your oats, you
Mhm.
are. Uh, you are going to be tempted. This does
Right.
relate to things like Putin. When you
Yeah.
get into positions of power, that is, people who can do no wrong
Mhm.
generally end up doing a lot of wrong because
Right.
they're unconstrained. So
Yes.
if you
Yeah.
know you're in for an Academy Award tonight, you might just end up
Yeah.
uh, more prone to a brain fart. I've certainly been
Yeah.
in that situation at a much
Yeah.
more modest level. I have
Right.
almost no Academy
But
Awards.
nobody's putting you in check. Yeah, nobody's putting you in check. when it
That's right.
happens.
No, that's right. So that
Yeah.
it's a fundamental problem with leadership, and it fits into, the old question, who governs the governors,
Mhm.
is made much worse by this. That is,
Yeah.
when you get into a position, um, so this is also, you could say, about the a-hole vortex.
Mhm.
We want power. Why do we want power? In a way, it can often be, why do we want status? Why do we want fame? Why do we want to be an influencer?
Right,
A
right.
lot of it is that we imagine that we can reach this plateau above it all, where we have the wild card, trump card. And a
Mhm.
lot of our popular heroes are people who appear to us as being completely themselves and completely glorious. That's what appeals to us. It's the sense
Right.
that they can say whatever they
They're
want, and whatever
infallible.
they say, they're golden.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
This I just want to recognize how tempting this would be for humans, and how
Yeah.
inaccessible it is for chickens. They can't do it.
Right.
Dogs
Right.
can't do it. Right? I mean,
Right, right. They
they,
don't have these
they
worries or these yeah.
they don't have words. This
Mhm.
incredible system that enables you to imagine anything.
Right.
The words
Right.
are radically different from other sign systems.
Yes.
Recently I comment, everyone in the world can imagine the world living in perfect harmony. Everyone in the world could also imagine a rhinoceros in a pink tutu twirling the
Mhm.
universe on its nose. That is,
Right.
imagination is a realm in which you can think anything.
Right. Yeah, yeah. We create a reality based
Well,
around
we
the language that we're
Yeah,
using.
we create. I wouldn't say it's a reality. That I mean, I
Mhm.
think reality is. I would say there's endless debate. There will always be debate
Mhm.
about what
Yeah.
reality contains, but there's not much debate about the container.
Right.
Reality
Right.
is the container that holds the
Mhm.
ever changing, the ever evolving uh, conditions that we have to pay attention to, or we die. That's
Right.
reality. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the rhinoceros with the pink tutu is escapism or entertainment. And just to touch briefly on that, I think that entertainment is the solution for preventing a-holery. We all need to play God.
Mhm.
Entertainment sits in this funny little. It occupies this. We treat it as an option. I think it's a necessity. I
Mhm.
don't think I don't think anybody can be realistic all the time. It's too terrifying a world. Um, Even that we know that we're going to die, just terrifying. So we need to play God. We need our flights of fancy, and the trick is to take them with a return ticket to reality secure in your heart pocket. It's not even
Mhm.
how far out you go; it's whether you remember to come back. So,
Right.
so I think that entertainment, those flights of fancy, including the ones where you get to play God, where
Mhm.
you think you're Iron Man. We need that. We just need to get a little better at the return tickets to reality.
Right,
I
right.
mean,
Now,
yeah.
Lorinda, she's watching
Oh,
us on
sorry.
LinkedIn, and she just popped up and said, "Many just never got training by parents.
Yeah.
What you expect." Right? What do you think about that? The training by the parents? Because I don't know. I understand how your background will absolutely have an influence on how you can view the world and how you interact with the
Yeah.
world, but I also am a firm believer in that how I want tomorrow to be for me at this moment in time
Yeah.
is is up to me to do what I can to make that
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
so
And
I
then
don't
the
really
question is whether for me, the next question would be whether you hold those two as 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 affirming both, or recognize that they're intention.
yeah.
So there's a line that touches my heart deeply on this question. The name
Mhm.
disappeared from the screen, but it's a
Okay.
poem. It's from a poem by
Right. Mhm.
Lorenda. So there's a poem by the same guy who I quoted before, Philip Larkin. He says, "An only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings, and may never."
Mhm.
And only life can take so long to climb clear of its wrong beginnings, and may never. Really,
Mm.
really feels poignant to me. Um,
Mhm.
I'm so the tension is, I think of it as somnipotence. I'm not omnipotent and I'm not impotent. I'm somnipotent. I've got some powers to change myself, and they're
Right.
not universal. And I won't buy into the school. I think of it as a kind of robo envy. Just reprogram
Mhm.
yourself. No, that's
Right,
not how
right.
we work. We're not like that.
Yeah.
We are bundles of habits. And anybody who knows habits by design have
Mhm.
momentum. You can't stop them on a dime, usually. Occasionally you can. I've had some interesting hairpin turns in my life when I just cold turkeyed off of things,
Mhm.
but that's you can't just simply expect that. Um, yes, what do you expect? There are, and I think this problem is going to get a whole lot worse. Uh,
Mm.
uh, Gosh, I find myself quoting the same guy 3 times.
Yeah.
Man passes on his misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. Was
Oh, wow.
no, no. He was a bitter. He was a romantic cynic like I am. That is,
Right,
he's
right.
living with that tension. But no, what do you expect? And I think it's going to get a whole lot worse. I think
Mm.
that there. I think that and it's not just parenting, because parenting these days is probably even a fraction of the education people get. So is school. I would say social media is in making it more and more enticing to become an a-hole for whatever
Mhm.
cause or no cause at all, whatever. Um, it's just the easier option, and
Yeah.
so there is a way in which humankind could degenerate really fast to
Yeah.
where language is primarily being used as kind of braying noises.
Right.
Animal
Yeah.
braying. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I do think social media is the path of least resistance when we're talking about
Yeah,
that. I
that's
mean,
right. When the race to the bottom, as they sometimes describe it, and yet
right.
I love the stuff for it. I find it incredibly useful. Social media has
Mhm.
been fabulous for maintaining conversations, not just through COVID, but all over the world. It's just that this use of it that I'm attempting, that is
Mhm.
to have really richer conversations, is the minority use of it. That's just not what most people are going to get to. And I guess again for Laronda's point, because it's
Yeah.
just not. It's not. Yeah, yeah.
Going to get worse. It is a hard it's a challenge. It really is because at the end of the day we try to we talk about a-holes and jerks and what are some of the things that we can try to do. And really at the end of the day we can only focus on ourselves, right? I mean that's we can try to do our best, but I don't know. It's so hard. It's so because I will fully admit there are some days where I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling a certain way about this, and I'm gonna have an a-hole moment, and I don't care. I'm gonna be an a-hole about it, and that's it.
But if you know that you're doing that, and also
Right.
you don't end up suffering the consequences that Will Smith will be suffering, that is, it can do a
Right.
lot of damage to your
Yes.
reputation.
Yes.
That is, you have to pick your moments to do that kind of
Right.
venting, but also
Mhm.
to do it ironically. So
Yeah.
irony is underappreciated. I think it is the
Mhm.
ultimate lube. It's all of us kind of winking at each other and saying, this is dead serious. And it's also kind of slapstick.
Right.
That is,
Right.
so you get this from great comedians. You get this from Will Smith and Chris Rock.
Yes. Yes.
You get this
Mhm.
from comedy in general, which is people kind of laughing at and with each other. I
Yes. Yes.
invite people to laugh at me with me. I need to laugh at myself. I'm
Yes.
a member of humankind. I'm not some exception. We're a hoot. When you think
Right.
about us, with these mid-sized mammals that recently acquired this newfangled contraption called language, it's dire, and it's
Yeah.
also very funny. Um, but that you're having an a-hole moment makes a difference. That's the irony. I'm dead
Mhm.
serious, and no, I know that I could be wrong. No,
Mhm.
this is my best bet, and I know I could be wrong, is right there in the realm of irony.
Right,
So
right.
and sorry, one last thing. The Southern style of blunt tact is very ironic.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
love about it. That's why I savor about it.
Yeah. So y'all heard it. Irony is the lubricant for a-holes.
No, sorry.
You
No,
heard it.
that's way wrong. That's not what I meant. It's what I mean is, boy, now I'm gonna get in trouble. No, it's psychoproctologist. I'm not a
Right.
proctologist. I'm not an expert there either. But what I'm saying is that it's the social lubricant.
Yes.
Because of your first point, your point coming into this, we would call it in systems theory, we call it contragrade. People come at each other from different angles. Where you stand depends on where you sit or where you've been driving all your life. So yeah, we're going to come at each other with friction. We might imagine the romantic dream is that we have perfect alignment. We found someone who's on exactly the same trajectory as us. Nonsense. That you will find out that's not true. So how do
It's
you
not.
handle it? How do you handle the incompatibilities? That is,
Right.
the relationships that I seek most are ones where we have compatibility in how we negotiate the incompatibilities.
Yes.
And that for
Yes.
me is where the lubricant comes in. It's not for
Yes.
a-holes, it's for dealing with people in our everyday life. If you can get away from an a-hole, do. If you can't, I do recommend that I do have some theories about how to disappoint them. They deserve to be
Right.
disappointed for playing God. Um, but if you can get away from them, and if you're dealing with regular people who have a-hole moments, yeah, irony's good. Wink.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think we all have those a-hole moments. And Danny says Will Smith apologized to Chris Rock. Let it go.
Oh, Danny, I would never brought the topic up. I haven't
I
mentioned it
did. I
before.
brought the topic up,
That's right.
and I think it was on my mind because I read it was a poll that was taken, and I can't remember who did the poll, so take it with a grain of salt. But it was 3 and 5 people agreed that Will Smith was out of line with
Brain fart.
reacting the way he
Yeah, that's right.
reacted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
brain fart.
But
I was interested in there were like 2 out of 5 people who were like, nah, that he's cool. That was
But
okay.
check this out. I actually, before we let it go, I want to pay attention to the
Mhm.
attention it has gotten.
Yes.
One of
Yeah.
a favorite hobby of ours now, better used in the realm of entertainment than politics, I think, is to play moral pundit. That is, if you're
Yes.
playing God, you are going to be in the position of adjudicating every case. You will want to play the supreme judge who's
Mhm.
deciding what is and isn't appropriate. And there are whole
Right.
channels devoted to this these days. Tucker Carlson is the quintessential Karen. He is just
Yes.
nonstop passing judgment on the world from a position of feigned neutrality.
Yes.
I am grateful whenever we channel that into triviality like Will Smith and
Mhm.
Chris Rock. That's fine. Go do your vanity project in the realm of entertainment. You bring that into statecraft, you will not be a state for much longer. You
Right.
sit back and play like you're the moral expert because you can point out flaws in other people's behavior that proves that you are flawless. That's how you kill a country. We
Right.
can't afford that.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
self-love is a human necessity. Get a room, take it
Right.
offline, do
Right.
it someplace where it doesn't end up damaging other people's lives. That's my take on it.
No, I agree, and I think that's, going back to the social media aspect of it, it serves to augment,
That sense that, yeah,
exactly what you're talking
you
about.
get to simply play pundit. You're suddenly God deciding what's right, what's wrong, um,
Right.
if you can blare your police siren at other people so loud you don't get to hear your own faults, it becomes addictive.
Mhm.
That becomes what people end up wanting to do. They just blare at other people, that as if I call it exempt by contempt. If I show enough contempt for some other one's behavior, it proves I don't have it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's very
And
addictive.
and that's why, such a trivial thing as, the Oscars and
Yeah.
that thing that happened at the Oscars, that's why everybody is so intent on having an opinion
Yeah,
about
and
it.
I'm still saying
Mhm.
much better there than if you're talking about running a government. Government, it can't be
Yeah.
your vanity project. Do your vanity projects
Right.
elsewhere. Pretend
Yeah.
you're Iron Man, pretend that Jesus is name drop Jesus as your best buddy, whatever. That's all
Mhm.
fine. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
bring that into the actual running of things, you're in trouble. You can't,
Right.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
escapism is absolutely necessary. Just do it,
Mhm.
get a room.
Yeah. Get a room, get a room. And something that I'll just kinda add to that is, we're talking about, the dangers of having that type of a mindset, in politics or running the government, just kinda scaling it down even to just running your own business, if you run a corporation,
Right. Yeah.
I think the same
Almost,
rules.
almost the same. It depends on what the business is, but a business
Mhm.
actually is tethered to reality in a way
Yeah.
that government may not be.
Mhm.
There's a joke about this. There's a guy boasting about his successful marriage, and a friend asks, "What do you attribute it to?" And the guy says, "Well, I make all the big decisions. My wife makes all the little decisions." And
Mm.
the friend asked for an example. He says, my wife decides where I work, where we live, where the kids go to school, where we vacation, and I decide whether the US should invade Iraq.
Right.
Government is kind of abstract. Business is not
Right.
so much. Business, you
Right.
actually have to, um, I mean, it depends on the business. Obviously, there are derivative businesses that are detached from reality. And if your business is simply the branding of entertainment or yourself as an influencer, you can get way off. But if you're producing widgets, then yeah, you got to pay attention to producing the widgets. There's a limit to how much you can play God and get away with it.
Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of capitalism, actually, is that if you suck, you lose.
Right.
Not always. I mean, I'm talking about capitalism,
Not
not what
always, but right.
no, not what we have right now. It's not ours is
Mhm.
a much more complicated system than capitalism. But
Right.
the concept of capitalism is um, address the realities of your customers, and you'll do better.
That's right. That's right. Wow, Jeremy, we could talk all day. I just love picking your brain. I love listening to you talk about this stuff. I just enjoy having you on the show. We could go all day, but it's been over an hour now.
I
Time
know.
flies. Time
No,
flies.
I'm insufferable. I go on and on. um, uh, See, there's some irony. There's some self-effacing irony.
Yeah.
So, have me back sometime if you like.
I would absolutely love to. And while we're at it, I'm gonna okay, get it right here. I'm
Oh,
gonna
how
plug your
sweet!
book, plug in your book for you. So yeah, I ordered this on Amazon. Make sure that you get your copy.
And notice that the
Um,
cover is a joker and an ace. That's the wild card trump card. I can do
there you go.
whatever I want, and whatever I do is always the best. That's what
It's
that's about.
always the best. Damn the consequences,
And
right?
the consequences. The consequences. Reality is just wrong.
Right. Well, and I invite you go to Jeremy's website, jeremysherman.com. And, if you read the intro, he writes a lot for Psychology Today. Thousands of articles are out there. So I really just enjoyed having you on the show. And thank you so much
Thank you.
for
All
sharing
right.
your ideas. And I know you don't like the word expertise, but
My sharing my
you're
specializations.
your specializations, yeah,
There we
with
go.
us. Absolutely enjoyed us. So everybody who's watching, thank you for joining us. Thank you for, participating and answering or asking questions
Yes,
and
thank you.
responding. Amberine was like strong point, moral experts, right? And Lorinda also responded,
Thank you.
talk
And also,
reality. Mhm.
I make a lot of memes on Facebook, Instagram, and all of that. If you, I welcome friends on any of those social media formats. Find me on Facebook. I'd love to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram. Are
You can
you on the
find way too
Twitterverse?
on which one?
On the Twitterverse?
I'm in
Twitter?
the Twitterverse. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, yeah, if you Google my name, I've got two YouTube channels. One on the origins of life research. One on a-hole psychoproctology. There's way too much of me online. Just Google my name, you'll find me.
You will pop up.
I will. All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and y'all
Thank
have
you.
a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.